On your Wednesday episode of Locked On Raptors, did the Chicago Bulls and Memphis Grizzlies just set the stage for the Raptors to be saved from themselves?
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Wednesday, February the 4th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Raptors now for 12 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on Blue Sky. You can find the show on Instagram. You can join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. Link in the description of the podcast. 100% free to join. And what a time to join. It's trade deadline week. It's bananas. The fake trade sickos chat absolutely popping off. Come hang out, be part of our listener community. Enjoy trade deadline day in a place where it's fun to talk about sports on the internet. What a concept. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win ahead of the big game this Sunday. But before that game, we have our own Super Bowl on Thursday here. Of course, it is trade deadline day. It's the day where all the little piggies out there just get to eat at the trough all day long. And we will continue to feed slop into that trough today as we talk about the happenings around the NBA yesterday, which I think actually, in fact, have some pretty serious ramifications for your Toronto Raptors. We talked at length yesterday about the Domantas Sabonis possibility. We'll touch on that a little bit later on, as well as things have evolved there with the Sacramento Kings. We'll get into the concept of, all this consternation of, do you dump Jakob Poeltl somewhere? What if they just don't? That is, in fact, an option here should the Raptors pursue it. We'll get into all of that today. But we should start with the kind of bananas day around the NBA yesterday with a couple of trades in particular that may hold some serious ramifications for the Toronto Raptors as it pertains to one, Jakob Poeltl, who, of course, it's no secret, has not played in quite some time. He has been signed to an extension that is not looking particularly good on the books for the next 5 years. The last year is not fully guaranteed, so essentially 4 years, but it's not a deal that is aging well, and it hasn't even started yet and doesn't even start for another year and a half, and it makes some sense for the Raptors to want to get out in front of it and get off of it if they can. Obviously, with the sort of perfect scenario here being Jakob Poeltl comes back and is healthy and is playing basketball for this team again someday. We don't know if that's going to happen, and it might be time if the Raptors can find a workable deal to move off of that contract. It's been the sort of reason why Domantas Sabonis, I think, has been in the ether as a potential Raptors target. You get a big man for this season who does a lot of the things Poeltl does, just a little bit better, and you get off of that Poeltl deal before it kind of weighs your books down for the next handful of years. We'll get more into that as we go forward, but the deals from yesterday, the two that stand out, the Utah Jazz, Memphis Grizzlies, Jaren Jackson Jr. trade, a very Brandon Ingram-coded trade, by the way, from the end of the Utah Jazz, a team that's been mired in not being very good and kind of half-heartedly tanking the last couple of seasons. They go and get Jaren Jackson Jr., who's just a good basketball player, not a perfect basketball player, but a good basketball player who fits with a lot of the guys they've got there. The Lauri Markkanen and Jaren Jackson Jr. duo should be lots of fun. Keontae George has maybe made that deal a little bit more sort of palatable in terms of getting out of the tank and getting serious next year. I like the move for Utah, even if it's not perfect. Sometimes you just get good players and it's fun. But the reason why this is interesting for the Raptors, not tied to the Brandon Ingram parallels at all, is that the Memphis Grizzlies now seem to be signaling we are going fully into the tank. Hello, we're going to stink for many, many years to come. And it's been reported by someone in the know. Brett Siegel from Clutch Points is someone who, is kind of throwing stuff out there in the ether quite a bit. As far as, intel from around the league, who knows how real any of it is because all these people have agendas, et cetera, et cetera. But the reporting from some in the know, or presumably in the know, is that the Grizzlies may in fact be a landing spot for Jakob Poeltl's contract now, which is interesting to say the least. And then another move that happened yesterday, the Chicago Bulls making the swap with the Boston Celtics, sending Nikola Vucevic to the Celtics in exchange for Anthony Simons. That left the Bulls with not a whole lot in the way of non-guard players on their roster. They have very clean and lean books going forward, and they may also be signaling, you know what, we're kind of recalibrating here. They got Jaden Ivey in a separate trade and kind of cleared their decks a little bit. getting off of Kevin Huerter, and they are now a team that is oops all guards, that is maybe going to actually do the thing everyone's been begging the Bulls to do for years, which is just kind of stink on purpose. And it opens up the possibility that the Bulls might also be a place that could absorb Jakob Poeltl's contract as well. They've also got a lot of guys on that team who've been kind of rumored as trade pieces. Ayo Dosunmu, Kobe White. They've got the big expiring Zach Collins contract. Maybe there's something there. We'll get into some of the fake trade ideas coming up in just a second here. But I do think when you couple this with the reporting that we've heard from Sam Amick of The Athletic and others plugged into the Sacramento Kings, that the Kings do not want anything to do with Jakob Poeltl's contract, and that the sort of Domantas Sabonis deal might fall apart as a result of that, or might require a third team, I think it's very much pertinent that these teams, the Grizzlies and Bulls, have kind of opened up the possibility that they could be a team that absorbs the Poeltl deal, whether it's via the sort of three-team construction where Sabonis comes to the Raptors, RJ Barrett goes to the Kings, and then Poeltl gets shipped to one of Memphis or the Bulls with whatever draft compensation you like, going to likely the team that takes on Poeltl. Or you cut out the middleman, which I think is what the Raptors should probably try to do here. And I went at length yesterday about why I don't think Domantas Sabonis is the right guy for the Raptors. I don't think it's the right fit. I don't think he fits the style that this team really succeeds with, where they're an excellent small ball team, and that's kind of their thing. It's their superpower, and bringing in Domantas Sabonis takes you away from that and also puts a gigantic $45 million player on your books who I don't know if you're just winning at a high level with Sabonis, Ingram, Barnes as your top three highest paid player trio. It's a bit of a clunky fit. Doesn't help the 3-point volume. You can listen to yesterday's show for all the reasons why I'm against the Domantas Sabonis idea. And so this possibility that you may be able to move off of Jakob Poeltl, if this is something the Raptors are so desperate to do, without having to bring Domantas Sabonis in by just teaming up with the Grizzlies or the Bulls on a trade, pretty interesting to me. I think this is something the Raptors should try and do if, in fact, they are worried about the long-term health of Poeltl or just want to get out ahead of this contract and get off of it and kind of wash their hands with it. Sunk cost fallacy and all that stuff. Hey, it's not working. We made a decision in the summer. It hasn't paid off. Let's just wash our hands with it now before it sort of bleeds into the next handful of years of the Scotty Barnes era, where, you're going to want to take advantage these next few years of having Scotty Barnes on one of the single most valuable contracts in the league. A 25% max for the next 4.5 seasons is a huge deal. You want to optimize this window as best you can, and the Poeltl contract may inhibit that. Of course, there's always the chance he comes back and plays. Yesterday, he was cited at Raptors practice, moving a little more spryly, doing a non-contact workout. Still no timeline for his return. And again, we'll get into it later in the show. There is an outcome here where the Raptors just don't do anything, hang on to all of their picks, and just don't move off of Jakob Poeltl, make a small move on the margins, whatever it is, and go through the deadline pretty quietly. That might even be the most likely outcome, because trades are hard to facilitate. And, it's what, we're 24 hours at the time of recording this, 27 hours away from the deadline. Like, this stuff might not get over the line, and the Raptors might carry Poeltl onto the team into the summer and beyond. And if he's going to get back on the floor and play, that's great. Like, he can certainly help this team. And the fact that they now have all these options for how they can play at the 5 means he won't be burdened to play 32 minutes a game or anything like that. Maybe it's the best of all the worlds that you hang on to your picks, and Poeltl's just the guy who comes back and is your effective trade deadline acquisition sometime after the All-Star break, whenever it might be. Again, the Raptors would know a lot better about the sort of physical prognosis for Jakob Poeltl in his back than I would, or than any of us do. There's a lot of assumptions by internet doctors going on with Poeltl. Either way, I think this thing with the Bulls and the Grizzlies opens up some pretty interesting avenues, and we're going to get into those in just a second. I'm going to run through a couple of fake trade ideas and sort of sort through the logic of why the Bulls and Grizzlies should maybe just be amenable to taking on Jakob Poeltl, even though that contract doesn't look too sexy. We'll talk about that coming up in just 1 second. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. And look, big game coming up this Sunday. It's Super Bowl 60. One last kickoff, one last final football Sunday, and the last chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. It is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same game parlay, this is a game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. Also, you get to bet on Gatorade colors and things like that. It's the perfect way to cap off the season to make the Super Bowl even more exciting. Kickoff to final whistle. If you're a new customer, just bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started and throw down some money on the Gatorade being blue over at FanDuel.com. Go get started ahead of the football on Sunday. Yes, the football. That's what we call it here. Back at it here on your Wednesday pre-trade deadline edition of Locked On Raptors. Of course, we've got games to talk about this week. We'll talk about those games tomorrow, Friday, against the Wolves and the aforementioned Chicago Bulls and the soon-to-be-mentioned again Chicago Bulls. You have that to look forward to. Also, plenty of deadline coverage. Joe Wolfond will be on, probably do a bonus deadline reaction episode. Lots of stuff ahead in the next couple of days for you. Also a reminder, the Locked On Raptors Everydayer Club is open for you to sign on up if you want to jump on in there. It's perfect time. $5 a month, $50 for the year, gets you ad-free episodes of the show every single day, plus access to the Locked On Discord, which is a lot of fun, and it features fans of Locked On shows from across the entire world. A great community we got building over there around the Locked On network, and it's going to be a fun place to be on trade deadline day. I can promise you that. That NBA chat. Also, really going to try to get a biathlon chat going when the Olympics start up. And again, link in the description of the podcast. And right now, if you use the code DEADLINE at the landing page when you sign up to the Locked On Raptors Everydayer Club, you will get a month for free as well to test it out. So go do that. Code DEADLINE at the Locked On Raptors Everydayer Club. Link in the description of the podcast. Okay, let's get to the Bulls and the Grizzlies, two teams that make me sad in different ways. The Grizzlies, because, they had a fun, promising team that got nuked by Ja Morant, discontented injury, and all of a sudden, wow, Cedric Coward's their best player. I like Cedric Coward, but that's rough stuff. And then, of course, the Bulls are the Bulls, and they are endlessly sad. And even more sad now in their current construction with only guards on the roster than maybe they've ever been. Only guards and Patrick Williams and Domantas Sabonis. I guess Sabonis is the one guy, the one shining light. Anyway, trade ideas between the Raptors and the Bulls. Again, I think the way the Raptors should go about this is if they can't, I guess, let me rephrase. I think the way they should go about this is they should just cut out the middleman and not involve Domantas Sabonis in any of these potential Jakob Poeltl salary dump talks. I think they should just try to go directly to the Bulls and the Grizzlies, who each have players who are interesting, who could help the Raptors right now, and try to work out a deal there to send Jakob Poeltl into their very clean and open salary cap books for the next handful of years. And you may be asking, like, well, okay, Jakob Poeltl is not a very attractive contract right now, Sean. Why would these teams want Jakob Poeltl? The reason is just like, why not? They are teams that are going to be bad seemingly for quite some time. The Grizzlies may be more sort of declaratively than the Bulls. Maybe the Bulls are trying to do their win 39 games thing in just a different fashion next year. We'll see. But if I'm those teams, I'm not necessarily turning my nose up at adding Jakob Poeltl to the books, because let's say, first of all, he sits out the rest of this season. That would actually benefit both of these teams if they're in fact trying to sink in the standings and boost their lottery odds to not have a decent player not playing for them. Particularly, it seems like the Grizzlies are going to go full tank mode here. And if you have Poeltl on the books with also Zach Edey out, like, that's a surefire way to go and lose a whole buttload of basketball games down the stretch. I don't think Santi Aldama is carrying you to a whole bunch of wins. And so that's reason number one. Like, it could help you, further tank yourself into good lottery position in a lottery that seems to be quite loaded with very good players at the top this year. And again, like, contrary to the sort of internet doctoring going on, I have a hard time believing Jakob Poeltl is just done playing basketball games. I don't think he has played his last game as a pro. Again, he was out there yesterday at practice, moving, not laying prone in a bed somewhere. Like, there's progress being made here. We don't know what the timeline is, and backs are finicky and weird, and not having a set timeline has kind of made everyone's brains go all screwy. But I think Jakob Poeltl at some point in the life of this contract is going to play productive, effective basketball. The Raptors, they're a little more incentivized to try to get someone better and more available in there right now than one of these other teams like the Bulls or the Grizzlies, because those teams are not trying to be good. But next season, if you get Jakob Poeltl back and you are the Bulls or you are the Grizzlies, we've seen there is proof of concept that Jakob Poeltl is just like a nice guy to have around with a young, learning team who can just be a viable sort of foundation for competent basketball. Probably not basketball that wins a whole lot, because, still these teams will likely be incentivized, in particular the Memphis Grizzlies, to lose a lot of games in the years to come. But having someone who can, like, be a functional rim protector, set proper screens, just be a guy who can give you the platform upon which to play developmentally friendly basketball that has some order and structure to it. we've seen that is a thing he definitely provides as a part of his value, and he might actually be quite valuable to a team like the Memphis Grizzlies in that regard. Also, like, you got to pay someone. And if these teams are committed to being bad and loading up their rosters with rookie scale contracts in the years to come, there is a salary cap floor. You have to have like money on your books. You got to pay somebody. And if you can bring in Jakob Poeltl to be just one of those guys that you pay while also getting some draft capital, even if it's just one sort of lightly protected future first round pick or something like that, top 8 protected, even top 4 protected, whatever it is, like, I think that's worth bringing Poeltl on board, because like, what else are you doing with that salary slot? This is what bad teams do. They take on players who are unfavorable elsewhere and they get draft capital for it. And we've seen the Grizzlies, they're hoarding a lot of picks right now. I think they have like 13 extra future first round picks. A 14th would go a long way, especially if it's sort of like a speculative future prospect thing where it's like, oh, maybe the Raptors in 2029 are not very good, and this could be a solid pick for us, that type of thing. And so I think if you're a team like the Grizzlies and probably the Bulls, and frankly, this applies to the Kings as well, who don't seem very self-aware, don't seem to understand they're going nowhere fast. But if you're one of these teams that's not going to be good for the next 3 or 4 years anyway, there is no harm in having Jakob Poeltl on your team. Poeltl's contract is damaging to a team that is trying to spend a lot of money, spend to the cap and beyond, make moves to improve talent and improve fit and sort of evolve a roster in a winning way. Poeltl's contract might be an inhibitor to that going forward. And so that's the reason why these teams might be more into having Poeltl on their roster than the Raptors might be right now. I just think, like, again, getting some draft capital in exchange for some bad money doesn't prevent you from pursuing any of your aims in the next few years, which for these teams, mostly the Grizzlies, but again, we'll see about the Bulls. I have no idea. The Bulls might actually try to tank and be normal. They might try to go sign some big free agents and just be mid again. Who's to say? But if you're the Grizzlies in particular, there's just no downside to bringing on Jakob Poeltl. And if you're the Bulls, like, you just traded Nikola Vucevic, you have no big men like at all on the roster. Having Poeltl, if he's a healthy guy next year, to be, again, a competent screen setter for your guards. Jaden Ivey, you're probably going to pay. Poeltl's the kind of guy who could help a dude like that along. Josh Giddey could use a useful screener, roll man, that type of stuff. Like, there's some argument to be made here. If you don't think Poeltl's just completely cooked as a player who can play basketball games forever, which I don't think he is, and I think would be very shocking if he were, then I think there's an argument to be made that Poeltl is very useful to those types of teams. A couple of ideas just kicking around in the spot track trade machine. Look, it's trade machine ideas rarely come to fruition because, look, the people who run these franchises are smarter and more creative than I am. And, we saw yesterday with the Jaren Jackson deal. No one in anywhere was pitching Jaren Jackson Jr. to the Jazz, came out of nowhere, and that's how most deals kind of happen. And so, the Harden Garland thing out of nowhere too, right? Like, we often don't think of the things that are actually going to come about. We see the obvious things and say, ooh, that makes some sense. And they often don't work out. But just for the sake of fun and trade machinery on the day before the trade deadline, a couple of ideas, just sort of rough outlines of how the Raptors might be able to approach the Bulls or the Grizzlies if, in fact, they're just going to cut the Kings out of this whole thing. First off, you have this one with the Chicago Bulls where it's Jakob Poeltl, Grady Dick, a future first-round pick, protected top 8 in 2028. The details on the pick, whatever, sort them out however you want. And a couple of second-rounders this year for Ayo Dosunmu and Zach Collins, who has an $18 million expiring deal. Ayo is also expiring as a UFA this summer, but you get his bird rights and you'd have the chance to re-sign Ayo Dosunmu. We've talked about Ayo on this show. A guard like that who can kind of play both guard positions, give you some rim pressure, a really good defender, a great three-point shooter the last couple of years as well. I'm into Ayo Dosunmu big time as a potential infusion of talent into the guard ranks for the Raptors. And so if you can get that done, Collins comes off the books this summer. You can go and maybe re-sign Mamu for what his market value is going to be. You use the bird rights to keep Ayo. Maybe there's another move with RJ Barrett in the summer with his expiring contract where you go and find yourself a big man or something like that. I think that's a reasonable thing to approach the Bulls with. And, again, maybe they don't take it, but maybe they do. And all of a sudden, you've got yourself a nice extra guard. Zach Collins is not much of anything. He's just an expiring contract. But, that's one sort of idea. There's also plenty of machinations you could come up with the Bulls, right? They've got Kobe White. Maybe you're looking at a Kobe White rental. Maybe you want to get Kobe White and pay him long-term. Maybe you prefer him to Ayo Dosunmu. Like, there's a million things you could go and do with the Bulls. I think they have the salaries and stuff to match if everyone's kind of incentivized and wants to do it. There's also the Grizzlies, who maybe I'm a little less enthused by the players they have to send back. I've been a big Scottie Pippen Jr. guy. He's still yet to play games this year, so it seems like he's ramping back to try to return. But they do also have Ty Jerome, who just returned. I'm not a big Ty Jerome fan. I think maybe last season with the Cavs was sort of a perfect happenstance of a guy going to a perfect basketball context and looking good and then totally looking not good in the playoffs. He got paid. Good for him. He makes $9 million a year. So in this deal, it's Jakob Poeltl, Grady Dick, and the 2028 first I threw to the Bulls in that last one as well for Ty Jerome and Brandon Clark, who has a year left on his deal after this one at $12.5 million. He's played 2 games this season. He's been hurt for most of the last handful of years. He's just kind of salary in this. He's not going to actually help your big man rotation in all likelihood. Ty Jerome gives you some guard help, and then you just kind of roll with your small ball center situation. Maybe you also turn Ochai Agbaji in a couple of seconds into your Goga Batadze or something like that. You get the big man that way. There's some other things they can do. But I'm calling both the Grizzlies and the Bulls and seeing if something like this can come together. Maybe it doesn't, because, again, I'm a dum-dum, but I think those types of constructions, like there's an incentive on both ends for each team to be into that. You can get a future first-round pick from the Raptors who knows what they'll be in 2028 or 2030, whatever they put that pick out there for. Maybe it's this year's pick. I wouldn't do that if I'm the Raptors. I think that's a valuable pick to have. But, if it's a deal breaker, then maybe it's this year's pick and you just bite the bullet, whatever. But I think one future first-round pick, lightly protected, with the sort of salary relief you're giving these other, in particular the Grizzlies taking back Brandon Clark, sort of bad money for bad. I think there's a workable pathway there for both teams to come away feeling all right. But we'll see. Again, I throw those out, and if the Raptors make a trade, maybe it's with a team we haven't even talked about yet, because that's how these things generally tend to go. Either way, we'll come back on the other side, get into the idea of more Sabonis talk, but also just like, what if the Raptors just keep Jakob Poeltl? There's nothing wrong with it necessarily if you don't find a way to offload him before this deadline. I know there's been this sort of sense of immediacy, but maybe that's silly. We'll get to that coming up to close out the show. Today's show is brought to you by Quo. And look, new year, new systems. This is the time when a lot of us look at the messier parts of how we run our businesses and think there's got to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the quickest upgrades you can make. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the smarter way to run your business communications. Because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with customers. Just speaking as someone who sometimes has to call the guy to fix things. If I'm calling the guy to fix things and they're not answering, or I'm not getting a clean answer of availability or whatever because someone's not on the clock, whatever it is, I'm not getting a good answering machine message to leave my wants and needs with someone who's going to get back to me quickly, I'm just going to the next guy who I can call to fix the thing in my house that needs to be fixed. So don't be the person who gets passed over by a dum-dum like me, and have your communication streamlined so everyone can see your full conversations. Everyone shares one business number so nothing gets missed. There's no surprise that Quo is the #1 rated phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. Make this the year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/LockedInNBA. That's QUO.com/LockedInNBA. Quo, no missed calls and no missed customers. Today's show is also brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like seeing an NBA game in person. The crowd, the energy, the moment, the mascots doing cool things, the baby races at halftime. It's all there for you. Getting tickets, though, hasn't always been super simple. That's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. Pull up the Game Time app. Pick an upcoming NBA game. The Raptors play tonight against the Wolves. Maybe you want to go see Anthony Edwards live. He's very cool. Maybe they'll trade for Giannis before tonight. You'll get to see the husk of the Wolves roster without Julius Randle and Jaden McDaniels or whatever. And it's guaranteed win night as they wait for Giannis to arrive. One way or another, you can get tickets. And as you get closer to game time, the tickets often get much more affordable in price as well. So maybe you're walking around near the arena and you're on a whim going, I want to go to the game tonight. There's also one tomorrow against the Bulls. Maybe you can see Jakob Poeltl play for the Bulls tomorrow, or sit on the bench for the Bulls. Who's to say? Either way, everything feels quick, intuitive, stress-free, start to finish. You get all-in prices up front. It's a great app. I use it all the time. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDONNON. That is for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. And remember, it's gametime.co, not gametime.com. Gametime.co. Go check it out. All right, back at it here, closing things out on your Wednesday pre-deadline edition of Locked On Raptors. And let's sort of circle back to Jakob Poeltl. It's look, we might be in the final days of the Jakob Poeltl era with the Raptors. It seems like there's at least an attempt on the Raptors' end to try to offload him, whether it's for Domantas Sabonis or to drop his salary into some other team's lap in exchange for some draft capital also going into that team's lap. And look, again, because of where this team sits, the future flexibility that you want to have during the Scotty Barnes era, all of that, like, it makes sense that the Raptors are trying to find ways out of this deal that they probably did not need to sign to begin with. And look, I will cop to it. I was like totally fine with the deal in the summer, mostly because I'm just generally fine most of the time with like keeping good players around. But the arguments against were like, why'd you do this now? He's not a free agent for quite some time. And who are you bidding against? And do you really need to do this right now, guys? Really? And look, fair enough. Like, he's not ever been like a perfect fit next to Scotty Barnes, et cetera, et cetera. It's been a weird era, man. And our pal Joe Wolfond kind of went into this yesterday. Just sort of like the joylessness of the second Jakob Poeltl era in Toronto through no fault of Jakob Poeltl on his own, right? Like, it's not his fault whatsoever that the Raptors did some kooky stuff regarding his return to the team and his, continued stay on the team. But the decisions the front office have made with regards to him, from when they brought him in, the day they made the trade, which I still think value-wise, I'm not sweating losing Rob Dillingham or whoever they could have taken in that draft for Jakob Poeltl, considering what they were trying to salvage at the time, which is what I thought was a thing worth salvaging, which was like the team of dudes who were core pieces to your title team. I thought there was plenty of reason to try to make that work around Scotty Barnes. Obviously, time has proven that to be incorrect. It is what it is. You get things wrong sometimes, and sometimes sentimentality burns you, whatever. But the trade, timing-wise, made very little sense with how bad that team was and where they were in the standings, and considering who was at the top of that draft lottery, Victor Wembanyama, if you recall, wasn't the most timely of trades, and it was a head-scratcher at the time for sure. I think Poeltl has been a good player for the team, and he's played on some bad teams through no fault of his own. And this year on the good team, through no fault of his own, his back has gone all screwy on him, and that sucks. It's been a huge bummer to watch Poeltl go through this. He's a good dude. He's a likable guy. He's a good guy to talk to around the team, and it's a shame to see a guy deal with just a really frustrating kind of injury, which is wonky back stuff. And you have the contract he was giving out this summer, and again, it all just kind of hangs at this like pall over his whole tenure with the team. And if we are in the final days of this saga, it'll go down as one of the strangest and most sort of befuddling eras of an individual player's time with the Toronto Raptors. But maybe we're not in those final days. Again, there's been this sort of sense of immediacy that I get when I talk to people about got to move off Poeltl, got to get off the deal, all this stuff. I'm not quite there as far as the immediacy. Again, my sort of core sort of feeling on this season is it's kind of already almost all gravy, and there is not this rush to go and totally remake the team, go get Domantas Sabonis, go make a big move, blah, 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 go get Anthony Davis, all that type of stuff right now. Like, this team is good, and maybe they're not going to be a great playoff team. We don't know. We'll see. We have to see what happens once they get to the playoffs, who their matchup is. All that stuff is going to be important here. And all of what happens in the playoffs, whether it's good or bad, whether they win or lose, is going to be important information to gather as you go forward with building the team. And again, there's always the possibility here that Poeltl comes back and is actually a helpful player to the team down the stretch going into the postseason, gives them all these different looks they can play at center. You can do the Poeltl classic big man thing with the pick and roll game that he provides. You can do the switchy defense with Colin Murray-Boyles. You can have the more offense leaning look with Mamu. Like, it's nice to have different ways to play, and Poeltl could very much be a guy who arrives and gives you some actually helpful minutes at the big man spot between now and season's end. And you might not get someone in a trade at this deadline, barring Domantas Sabonis, who actually provides that for you from the big man spot. And so, like, it's cliche and kind of lame to say he could be their trade deadline acquisition, but he could very well just be their trade deadline acquisition if he's back and playing post All-Star break, which is very possible. If he's back on the floor and moving now, who knows? Again, no timeline, no clear picture as to when he'll be back. And the uncertainty of it all makes it feel a little more pressing than it probably actually is. Because again, I don't think there's any way that Poeltl's just like done playing basketball in the NBA. That would be quite a stretch. And the fact that he's like moving and working out right now, I think suggests that he's going to return at some point, if not this season, then hopefully for next year, where you can again provide value, even if it's not quite up to the level of the contract that he's earning. And so, like, this just doesn't have to be like a cold salary dump where you send him off to a team with draft capital attached. You don't get a whole lot back. Again, the Bulls and Grizzlies maybe offer an avenue to do that while also getting a useful player back. that would be nice. But like, this doesn't have to be a thing where you go and sort of make your team into the Domantas Sabonis team for the next 2-3 years either, right? Like, there are options here, and one of the options is just do nothing and make a small move on the margins with Ochai and second rounders and maybe another salary in there to bring in another big man to help for this season. And you kind of reevaluate in the summer and go from there, see where Poeltl's health is at, things like that. The RJ Barrett contract obviously isn't expiring this summer, is an interesting trade chip if the Raptors don't extend him. Like, if I'm ranking the ways I'd like to see this play out before the deadline, number one is maybe that sort of deal you find with the Bulls or Grizzlies, where you get a helpful player back that maybe those teams don't have a huge use for or don't intend to pay this summer. And then you also get the Poeltl salary relief with a pick attached. That, like, I would not be upset if that happened. I think for the long-term health of the team and the cleanness of the books and the sort of building around Scotty Barnes thing, I think it would be helpful. Number two is just like standing pat and not moving Poeltl because you feel like there's this immediate sense you have to do it. Number three is going and getting Domantas Sabonis. Again, cut out the middleman. If the opportunity is there with the Grizzlies and Bulls to not go get Domantas Sabonis because it's the only way off the Jakob Poeltl trade, I think that's the way they should go. That's kind of all I have on this for now. I'm going to stop recording before news breaks and all of this is totally moot. But thank you so much for rocking with the show. We'll be back again on Thursday. We'll talk about the Wolves game. We'll have a bonus post-deadline reaction show as well. Joe Wolfond will come to talk about the game against the Bulls Thursday night and also, debrief on what happened at the deadline on Friday. Loaded week for you, as always. We got the postcast with Zelfie and Dwayne tonight and Thursday as well, so you can go check those out. Join the link, join the Discord. Link in the description of the podcast. 100% free to join. We'd love to see you there. You can also join the Raptors, Locked On Raptors Every Day Club. Link also in the description with a free month with the code DEADLINE. If you sign on up right now, you get ad-free episodes of the show every single day, plus access to our Locked On network-wide Discord, which is lots of fun. Anyway, thanks so much for hanging. We'll talk to you again on Thursday. Yes, it's Thursday. It's Wednesday today. So we'll talk to you Thursday with another episode or two of Locked On Raptors. Thanks for hanging. Bye-bye.